We were studying the electromagnetic spectrum in 8th grade, and as this was the week before winter break, most of us were checked out. Our teacher, Mrs. Larson, was enthusiastic about microwaves, explaining how they heat our food by exciting water molecules. But there was something in her voice that day, a subtle tension that made us lean in just a bit closer. She told us about an experiment gone wrong at a tech company not far from our town. They were developing a new type of microwave technology, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The idea was to harness the power of microwaves for instant heating, not just for food, but for entire rooms. The project was secretive, and only a few knew the details. They had created a prototype, a large, box-like machine that could heat a room in seconds, but something unexpected occurred during one of the test runs. The machine didn't just heat the room, it altered the electromagnetic fields in ways they hadn't anticipated. Mrs. Larson paused, glancing at the clock as if to check if she had time for the story. They turned it on at 3 p.m., she continued. By 3:01, the room was glowing, not just warm, but eerily luminescent. The researchers inside reported feeling a strange vibration, a hum that wasn't there before. The hum grew louder until it was all they could hear. Then, silence. When they opened the door, the room was empty. No signs of the researchers, no equipment, nothing but the walls and the machine, which had somehow shut itself off. For weeks the company kept it under wraps, simply calling it a disappearance, but whispers spread. Some said the researchers were trapped in the electromagnetic field, their molecules vibrating out of phase with our reality. Others claimed they heard voices from the machine when it was off, as if it was holding them in some kind of limbo. Mrs. Larson's eyes scanned the room, ensuring we were all still listening. The company tried to destroy the machine, but it wouldn't be destroyed. Every attempt to dismantle it led to more strange occurrences. Tools vanished, workers reported seeing shadows move where there shouldn't be any. The story became legend of the company. They ended up sealing the room, placing it under constant surveillance, but the machine reportedly activated on its own at exactly 3 p.m. every month. Each time, the eerie glow returned, stretching into the walls and ceilings as if trying to escape. Now, Mrs. Larson concluded, the company has moved out. The building stands empty, except for that one room. They say if you go there at 3 p.m., you can hear the hum, feel the vibration like a whisper against your skin, and sometimes, if you listen closely, you can hear voices speaking in frequencies we're not supposed to hear. The bell rang, signaling the end of the day, but nobody moved. We all looked at each other, half expecting to see fear or disbelief, but there was something else. There was curiosity. A chilling thought had settled among us. What if the stories were true? And what if, somewhere in that sealed room, were the echoes of those lost to a science not yet understood by humanity? I was a grad student working on lasers, specifically those in the microwave part of the spectrum. My project was innovative, aiming to enhance communication technology by manipulating microwave frequencies. But one evening, while working alone in the lab, an accident happened. The setup was routine, aligning the laser with the receiver, but that night something went awry. A sudden spike in the power output caused the microwave laser to misfire, not into the receiver, but into a stack of old, discarded electronics we used for parts. The air immediately filled with a thick static buzz, and a smell like burnt ozone. Shaken, I checked the equipment. Everything seemed fine, except for the eerie silence that followed. Then the lights flickered. At first I thought it was just an electrical glitch, but the sensation of being watched crept over me. As I turned to leave, the lab door wouldn't budge. A cold dread settled in my stomach as I tried the door again, and again. Panic rising, I noticed something odd on the monitor displaying the laser's output. The frequency had shifted, oscillating in a pattern that seemed almost intentional. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time had lost meaning. The lab's equipment began to operate on their own, oscilloscopes tracing patterns of their own accord, computers booting up. The air around me grew thick, as if charged with static electricity. Then the whispers started, faint at first, like static from an untuned radio, but then they grew clearer. Voices, or rather, one voice, speaking in a language I couldn't understand, yet it felt directed at me. The frequency of the microwave output matched the rhythm of the voice, creating eerie harmony. I tried to rationalize it was some sort of feedback loop, perhaps the electronics creating their own signals, but the sensation of a presence was undeniable. Suddenly, a scream tore through the lab, not from a person, but from the very air around me. The sound was mechanical, digital, yet unmistakably full of terror. It was as if the machines were screaming in pain or fear. I found myself backed against the wall, the lab's atmosphere thick with an unseen, oppressive force. The voice grew louder and more insistent, and then without warning, all the electronics in the room powered down simultaneously. The silence was deafening. I managed to push the door open with a force that seemed to originate from a burst of fear rather than physical strength. Outside, the night was unnaturally stiff, as if the world had held its breath. Since that night, I've heard stories from other tech workers about similar occurrences. Some say it's just urban legends, others claim it's the work of an entity from beyond our understanding. And perhaps this entity is summoned or trapped by the very frequencies we play with. I stopped working on microwaves soon after the events of the story took place. The fear wasn't just out of what might happen in the lab, but the lingering dread that whatever was awakened or accessed that night might not be contained by mere walls, or even the spectrum itself. Most people don't know this, but Wi-Fi uses the same part of the electromagnetic spectrum as your microwave, namely microwaves. This fact, while seemingly innocuous, forms the unsettling premise of what happened in the small town of Millfield. In Millfield, there was an old electronics repair shop owned by Mr. Henry, a man known for his eccentricity and his fascination with old tech. Henry had, over the years, accumulated numerous microwave ovens, each one more ancient than the last, claiming they were for parts. But Henry had a secret project, something he called the Microwave Network. One chilly November evening, Henry decided it was time to test his experiment. He had modified each microwave to emit a frequency slightly off from standard Wi-Fi, but just enough to still resonate through the town's wireless network. His theory was that these frequencies could be used to communicate with something beyond our usual spectrum of understanding. That night, as the townsfolk settled in, their devices began to act strangely. Phones vibrated with no notifications, televisions flickered with static, and Wi-Fi connections blinked in and out. But that was just the beginning. First, there were the sounds. Soft at first, like the hum of a microwave when it's heating up. But then, as the hour grew late, the hum turned into whispers. Voices, not human, yet eerily familiar, started to seep through every electronic device. They spoke of loneliness, of being trapped in the dark, cold silence of the electromagnetic void. Mrs. Thompson, an insomniac tech enthusiast, was one of the first to notice. She recorded the sounds coming from her router and played them back. The whispers were clearer now. Let us out. The next morning, pets in Millfield began to act bizarrely. Dogs howled without reason, cats hissed at walls, and birds flew erratically, crashing into windows. The town vet, Dr. Ellis, was baffled. He noticed that each animal showed signs of electromagnetic interference in their nervous systems, akin to what one might see from exposure to high levels of microwave radiation. Henry, however, was ecstatic. He believed he had opened a portal, a bridge to entities from another dimension, using the town's Wi-Fi as a conduit. He ignored the growing unease, the reports of sleepless nights filled with static voices, and the increasing reports of electromagnetic sickness. Then, the disappearances started. First, it was just small items, a remote here, a phone there, but then people began to vanish. Always in their homes, always near their Wi-Fi enabled devices. The last sighting of each person was them staring blankly at a screen, the room around them vibrating with that now familiar hum. The town was on the brink of panic when they found Henry. He was in his shop, surrounded by his array of microwaves, each one pulsing with light. He was laughing, but his eyes were vacant, staring at something no one else could see. "They're here," he kept saying. "They're finally here." The investigation revealed that Henry's network had indeed done something, but not what he had hoped. Instead of opening a portal, he had made Millfield a beacon, drawing in entities that existed in the spaces between frequencies. They weren't malicious per se, just lost, seeking escape from their eternal electromagnetic purgatory. But in their escape, they consumed, inadvertently pulling anything connected to their new realm into it. The town had to shut down all Wi-Fi, dismantle every microwave, and even go back to using wired connections for months. Eventually the disturbances ceased, the whispers stopped, and life returned to a semblance of normalcy. But, in the dead of night, if you listen closely to any old microwave, there might still be the faintest whisper of those lost entities, now forever part of our world, just out of phase with our own reality. I used to work for this company that did physics demonstrations to students. Picture an assembly in middle school where some wacky guy with long hair got up with an old microwave and started spitting science facts. For a good few years, I was that guy. Part of the work entailed raiding junkyards to find, among other things, old microwaves. We'd take these old beasts, gutted and dusty, back to our lab where we'd test their parts, ensuring they were safe for our little experiments. But one day, I found a different kind of microwave. Unlike the others, this one was pristine, almost new, but it had an odd aura about it. The casing was a deep, almost black blue, and it had no brand name, no serial number, just a small, cryptic symbol etched into the back. Curiosity got the better of me, and instead of taking it to the lab, I decided to take it home. There, in the quiet of my basement, I plugged it in. The hum it produced was unlike any other microwave I'd encountered. It was lower, almost like a growl. I set a cup of water inside and hit the start button. Instantly, the lights dimmed, and the air felt charged with static electricity. The water didn't boil, it simply vibrated, the cup shaking violently, then suddenly stopped. The power went out in my house, but the microwave's light remained on, casting an eerie glow. When the power came back, I opened the door to find the water had turned into a strange, gelatinous substance, shimmering with an unnatural light. I should have stopped there, but the scientist in me was intrigued. Over the next few days, I experimented with different items. Each time, the results were bizarre. A piece of bread turned into ash in seconds without any heat. A raw egg turned into a rubbery, indestructible ball. One night, while I was working late, the microwave started on its own. The room filled with a cold blue light. The symbol on the back now glowed faintly. From the microwave, a voice, not quite human, whispered, "Feed me more." I felt compelled, against my better judgment, to comply. I placed whatever I could find into it, rocks, books, even my old wristwatch. Each item disappeared or transformed into something unrecognizable, and with each cycle, the whisper grew louder and more insistent. More, more. The climax came when, in a moment of sheer madness or perhaps possession, I considered placing my hand inside. However, my rational mind broke through the haze. I yanked my hand back, unplugged the microwave, and dragged it to my car, driving straight to an electronics recycling facility. As I watched it get lifted away by the crane, I felt a chill, not from the night air, but from the realization that I had been so close to something beyond my understanding. What had I been interacting with? Was it a portal, an anomaly, or something else entirely? The memory of that microwave still haunts me, a reminder of the thin line between science and something far more sinister. Sometimes, I swear I still hear that whisper in the dead of night, "Feed me more." Back in high school, I was on the Science and Math Olympiad team. We made it to state my senior year, and I was participating in the electromagnetics and optics competition. That probably sounds a lot cooler than what it actually was. We basically just all sat in a room and took a test, and whoever got the most questions correct got first, etc. One of the problems on the test was about the principles behind microwave ovens. It was fascinating to me how something so mundane as heating food could be linked to complex physics. The idea stuck with me, and after the competition, my curiosity led me down a rabbit hole of research on microwaves. I found out about how they work by exciting water molecules, but also about their potential dangers if not used correctly. Fast forward a couple of years, and I was in my first year of college, living in a cramped dorm room with my roommate, Jake. Jake had this old, bulky microwave he'd bought from a secondhand store. It was one of those vintage models, with a dial instead of buttons, and it had a certain charm to it, or so we thought. One evening, we were cramming for our physics exam. The room was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. Jake decided to make some popcorn. He set the bag in the microwave, turned the dial, and the machine hummed to life. As the popcorn started popping, the hum turned into a low, unsettling buzz. Suddenly, the light inside the microwave flickered, and the buzzing grew louder, almost like a swarm of angry bees was trapped inside. Jake and I exchanged a worried look but shrugged it off, thinking it was just the old machine being quirky. Then, the room's temperature began to drop, and this eerie chill settled around us. The popcorn stopped popping, and the buzzing ceased abruptly. For a moment, there was silence, but then the microwave door slowly swung open, not by itself, but as if something invisible had pushed it. A cold gust of air swept through the room, carrying with it a faint, metallic smell. We laughed nervously, attributing it to static electricity or some odd electromagnetic phenomenon. But the next day, things got weirder. Every time we used the microwave, strange things happened. Shadows would dance at the edge of our vision, whispers would fill the room, and occasionally, items would shift on their own, like they were being nudged by an unseen force. One night, I was alone in the dorm, Jake was out, and I decided to heat up some leftover pizza. The microwave was already acting up, its light was dimmer, the sound more distorted. When I turned it on, instead of the usual hum, there was a voice, faint but clear, like someone's last breath whispering through the static. The voice said, "Help us." Before I could even process what I heard, the microwave sparked violently, and the room was plunged into darkness. The power had gone out. In the middle of the pitch black, I felt a cold touch, like icy fingers brushing against my neck. I stumbled back, panicking, my heart racing. When the power came back, I unplugged the microwave and never used it again. Jake and I moved it out to storage, but the incidents didn't stop immediately. For weeks, we'd hear whispers in the dark, feel unseen presences, and sometimes the room would inexplicably drop in temperature. We learned later from an old janitor that our dorm had been part of an old physics lab, where they experimented with high-energy electromagnetic fields. Some students had reportedly vanished or gone mad, stories chalked up to urban legends, but after our experience, I wasn't so sure. The microwave, with its constant use of electromagnetic waves, might have acted as a conduit, a weak point in the fabric of our reality, allowing something else to slip through. The thought haunted me, and the old, now silent microwave in storage became a chilling reminder of how science and the unknown can sometimes intertwine in terrifying ways. When I was a CS major in college, my dorm mate Michael conducted a lot of research. He was a prodigy, truly gifted, and I barely knew about anything he was working on. Eventually he began to work on this simulation, and posed a question that at the time I found truly bizarre. What if the electromagnetic spectrum, specifically microwaves, could be simulated differently? How could that change the fabric of the simulated reality, or rather, build it up from scratch in the first place? Michael spent months coding, often late into the night, his screen's glow casting a ghostly light over his face. He was obsessed with the idea of microwaves not just as carriers of information or heat, but as potential architects of digital life. One chilly autumn evening, he called me over to his setup. "I've done it," he whispered with a mix of fear and excitement. "I've simulated a world where microwaves dictate reality." The simulation was crude at first, just shades of gray swirling on the screen, but as he adjusted parameters, the image became clearer, revealing landscapes and structures, all pulsating subtly like the heartbeat of some strange digital organism. "What you're seeing," Michael explained, "is a reality where microwaves don't just transmit, they create. They bend light, alter time, even manipulate matter within the simulation." Curious yet skeptical, I asked if he could show me something extraordinary. He nodded, his fingers dancing over the keys with a nervous rhythm. Suddenly, the simulation's environment morphed. The sky in his digital world turned a sickly green, and the ground began to vibrate. Buildings appeared to twist and contort, as if the very fabric of their existence was being rewritten. Then, something even more chilling happened. A figure emerged from one of the distorted buildings, its shape fluctuating as if it was struggling against the confines of its own reality. It looked human, but its features were blurred, its movements erratic. "This," Michael said, his voice trembling, "is what happens when you manipulate the fundamental rules of physics too much. Entities begin to form, entities that shouldn't exist. They're drawn to the anomalies in the simulation, like moths to a flame." The figure on the screen seemed to notice us, its head turning directly towards the camera, or rather, towards us. It started moving, not towards us in our world, but within the simulation, towards what appeared to be the edge of the screen, where the simulation met our reality. Michael's excitement turned to horror. "I think it knows we're here, watching," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The entity reached the boundary. For a moment, everything went black. The screen flickered back to life, but now there was a cold stillness in the room, and a soft, static-like hum filled the air. Michael's simulation had become too real, too unpredictable. "We need to shut it down," he said, but before he could, the lights in our dorm flickered. The hum grew louder, and outside our window, the streetlights began to dim and sync with the simulation's eerie rhythm. "Michael," I said, my heart racing, "I think it's affecting our reality now." The entity on the screen, now clearer and more defined, reached out with a hand that looked almost human, yet not quite. It was as if it was trying to step through the screen into our world, driven by an unknown force or curiosity. Michael scrambled to shut down his machine, but as he did, the last thing we saw was the entity's face, a mix of sorrow and malice, before the screen went dark. We never turned that simulation back on. Michael abandoned his research, and we both transferred out of the computer science program. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that hum, and I wonder if somewhere, at some frequency, that entity is still trying to find a way out. In my early 20s, I was in kind of a slump. I'd graduated college and gotten a steady office job, but I really didn't have much of a social life, and no love life to speak of. One particularly dull week, I was forced to drag myself outside when my microwave broke down, and I needed to get a new one. I entered the electronics store with the enthusiasm of a sloth on a rainy day, my eyes scanning the white and silver appliances until they landed on the microwave section. The store was quiet, save for the soft hum of electronic displays and the occasional beep from a register. That's when I saw her. She was leaning against a display, her black lipstick contrasting sharply with her pale skin, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in a way that seemed almost artfully disheveled. Her outfit was an eclectic mix of black lace and velvet, adorned with chains and silver jewelry that caught the light with every slight movement. Her name tag simply read, Morgan. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice as smooth and cool as the metal she was surrounded by. There was a hint of amusement in her eyes, as if she could see right through my aimless wandering. Yes, I need a microwave," I stammered, feeling suddenly self-conscious under her gaze. "Let me show you some options," she said, leading me to a row of microwaves. As she spoke about wattage and features, I found myself more captivated by her than by the appliances. Her explanations were peppered with a dry wit that made even the mundane seem fascinating. "You know, most people just care about whether it can heat their leftovers, but there's an art to choosing the right one," she remarked, her fingers tracing the edge of a sleek black model. "This one, for instance, has a setting for melting chocolate, useful for sweet things." Her smile was subtle but infectious, and I couldn't help but smile back. We talked about more than just microwaves. She shared stories of her own life, her love for Gothic literature, her collection of vintage vinyl records. There was depth to her, a darkness not of sorrow, but of mystery and allure. After selecting a microwave, I lingered, not wanting our conversation to end. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" I asked, the words tumbling out before I could overthink them. Morgan's eyes lit up with a playful glint. "I'd prefer tea, actually. There's a place around the corner that has excellent herbal blends." And so it began. What started as a quest for a simple kitchen appliance turned into daily meetups, then dates, and then something more. Morgan wasn't just a goth girl who sold microwaves. She was an artist, a thinker, someone who saw the world through a beautifully dark lens that complemented my own view in unexpected ways. Months passed, and our bond grew stronger. We moved in together, her Gothic decor blending with my minimalist furniture in a way that could only be described as perfect chaos. And yes, the first appliance in our shared kitchen was that very microwave. We lived happily, not in a fairy tale ending, but in the real, messy, beautiful life we built together, where every day was an adventure, and every night her presence was my sanctuary.